Discover the incredible, hidden talent of a blind black boy that left a famous pianist shocked. Malcolm sat at the weather-beaten piano in the crowded cafe, each note a small rebellion against a world that doubted him. The patrons chatted and clinked their mugs of coffee, but as he stirred the air with his melodies, their voices melted away, replaced by the haunting beauty of his music. For Malcolm, blind since birth, it was all he truly knew, the comforting embrace of sound. But even as his fingers danced over the keys, a gnawing unease twisted in his gut. What if he wasn't good enough? What if the world only saw a blind boy and not the artist he dreamed of being? The judgment from the community felt heavy like a shroud. Too often, people dismissed him before even hearing a single note, their ignorance echoing louder than his music. He could still hear their sneers, the murmurs behind closed doors. He recalled his mother, eyes filled with unwavering belief as she assured him there was nothing he couldn't do. But lately, even her faith seemed insufficient against the weight of the world's prejudice. As he played, a new presence cut through the air. A woman, elegant and captivating, caught his attention from across the room. Julia Weston, known for her breathtaking performances, stood as a monument of talent, yet she bore the burden of expectation. Malcolm felt a pulse of awareness. He could almost sense the walls creeping up around her, her inner conflict mirroring his own. Would she see him? Would she hear him? He wrestled with an acute awareness of every note he played, each one layered with layers of fear and hope. Before he could process the gravity of her presence, she was before him, her voice shaking ever so slightly. I didn't expect this," she said, an awkwardness settling between them. He felt something stir deep within him, a desperate yearning for validation but also an innate fear, an alarm that warned him of being shattered beneath her gaze. He noticed the hesitation in her eyes, battling between mentorship and her standing in the unforgiving world of music. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." But the tug of her indecision had already wrapped around his heart, squeezing tighter. What if she was forced to choose between guiding him and protecting herself? The very thought darkened his spirit. He could feel himself slipping, the warmth of potential turning bitter and cold, his eyes closing as he sought solace in the familiar notes of the piano. Did he even deserve a chance in a world that overlooked him? Questions throbbed painfully like a war drum, crowding the melodies he longed to share. Then came the day of the music competition, a supposed dream turned nightmare. As he stood backstage, bravado masked his fear, yet it gnawed at him, insidious. The unwavering voices of those who had scorned him echoed in his mind, making his stomach churn. What if they didn't just laugh? What if they crushed his spirit? His breath quickened at the thought. Just then, a surge of anguish coursed through him. Julia was out there, and she believed in him despite everything. But could he truly rise above the noise? As he stepped forward onto the stage, the spotlight blazed like judgment upon him, and every gasping breath from the audience felt like the weight of 1,000 expectations. He turned back to Julia, searching for reassurance in her eyes. Would she inspire him, or would those that doubted him swell to drown him? In that moment, Malcolm felt everything. He was the music, the struggle, and the hope stirring ahead of him. With closed eyes, he grasped the keys, his heart racing, gripping tightly onto his last thread of courage as he prepared to unleash not just a performance, but his very soul. As his fingers pressed down on the keys, waves of sound cascaded into the air, tangible and powerful. The music swelled from his soul, each note carving pathways through the uncertainty that had plagued him. The sharp, bright tones clashed with somber melodies, reflecting the duality of his existence, a celebration of his gift intertwined with the doubts that lingered like shadows. In that moment, the world around him faded away, leaving only the connection he forged with the piano. It was as if he was both the instrument and the musician, feeding off the resonance of every chord he struck. Beneath the spotlight's searing glow, Malcolm felt the audience's anticipation pulse through the room. He could almost taste it, a heady mix of hope and skepticism that gripped not only him but also the assembled faces. Would they recognize the depth of his talent? Would they understand that he was so much more than the boy they expected to fail? This was the moment, the one where he could shatter preconceived notions and open a window into the essence of who he truly was. As he delved deeper into his performance, Malcolm infused elements of his life, moments of joy and sorrow, into his music. Each note gave voice to his struggles, reaching for the heights of triumphs and descending into the lows of despair. The crowd fell silent, entranced, and in that eerie stillness, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to experience in so long: pure confidence. But just as his heart began to soar, the dark whispers of doubt clawed back. A single, crippling thought broke through his focus: what if this was only a fleeting moment of brilliance? What if, when the applause faded, so too would his dreams? He struggled to refocus, to push the insecurity back into the recesses of his mind, to channel the deeply rooted conviction his mother had instilled in him. He could hear her voice, soft yet resolute, urging him to keep going, pushing him forward. With every measured stroke of the keys, the emotional release felt like a reckless abandon that turned the music into his lifeline. He painted vivid landscapes with his melodies, allowing the audience to drift along his journey. He played not just for validation, but to claim ownership of his identity. An artist, a creator, this was who he truly was. As he transitioned into the final movement, the crescendo built with pulse-pounding intensity. The intertwining of dissonance and harmony mirrored the chaos of his life, yet in that moment, he embraced it all. He was blind, yes. But he was also unyielding, giving life to his truth through music. Just as the final note hung in the air, suspended in perfect resonance, he felt a tidal wave of relief wash over him. Amid the thunderous applause that erupted around him, Malcolm's heart soared higher than it ever had before. He had seized this moment, wrestled it into submission, and made it his own. The open admiration of Julia's face as she rose to applaud filled him with a sense of validation previously unknown. Yet, as he stepped off the stage, elation quickly morphed into trepidation. There was no longer an escape from the reality waiting for him outside the spotlight. Did this performance truly change anything beyond this fleeting moment? As he scanned the crowd, he was met with various faces, some shining with newfound respect, others still clouded with familiar judgment. The echoes of applause faded, but deeper questions rang clear: was this moment just a beacon, or the beginning of a greater struggle? The noise of unrelenting doubt in the back of his mind loomed larger. In that haunting silence, Malcolm felt a familiar tug of uncertainty, and a question emerged, pressing upon him like a weight: what would it take for the world to see him for who he truly was? The challenge was clear, and he could sense that it was incoming, a moment that would require every ounce of his resolve to confront the tides of expectation and prejudice. As he made his way back through overwhelming cheers, Malcolm couldn't shake off the feeling that this was only the beginning of a much greater journey, one that would force him to face not just the community's perception, but confront his own deepest beliefs about himself. With each step away from the stage, Malcolm grappled with the weight of expectation that pressed upon him. The thrumming applause had flared like fireworks, but now he felt the inevitable descent into reality. For the first time, music wasn't simply a means of escape, it was a declaration and a challenge. In this delicate throat of transition, he pondered what truly lay ahead. As he navigated through the excited chatter of the departing crowd, an unfamiliar sensation bubbled within him. The raised eyebrows and surprised grins were evidence he had managed to flip the script, even if only momentarily. Julia sought him out, joy radiating from her as she approached, her eyes sparkling with genuine admiration. That was she started, but Malcolm was already shaking his head. While he appreciated her enthusiasm, it felt premature. The performance had felt monumental, but could he hold on to that momentum? Before he could respond, she interjected: "Malcolm, your talent, it's unreal. You've got something rare. Promise me you won't let this be just a moment." A challenge buried within her words ignited a fire in his chest. Would he dare to step beyond this solitary instance of recognition? As the crowd dispersed, turning into shadows along the halls, he understood this wasn't just a victory, it was a prelude, a kindling of his enduring fight against doubt, both outside and within. The murmurings of the evening replayed in his mind, and he found himself scrutinizing his own perspective. Could he turn this fleeting moment a splash of brilliance into something permanent? He was determined to break through, but how could one performance solidify his newfound identity? Later that night, as darkness draped across the city, Malcolm sat at his cluttered desk, framed by the flickering glow of a lamp. Sheets of music were scattered around him, remnants of the pieces that had long lived in his heart. The thoughts that clawed at him began to syncopate, urging him to sift through the noise to find consistency. Perhaps the answer lay in the very gift he had displayed earlier. He felt a pulse of resolve. This was his time to embrace the truth of his artistry. He shifted his focus onto the piano, the instrument that had become his confidant. In the sanctum of his small room, he turned the tide of anxiety into a fresh wave of creativity. The melodies he played transcended any anticipated judgment. Each note spilled forth confidence, painting a narrative beyond the stigma he'd often carried. But as he played, a new internal tension brewed. What genre did he want to claim as his own? Classical? Jazz? Or perhaps a fusion of the two? Each choice felt like a part of his identity he was wrestling with, grappling with existing notions of talent that the world had dictated. There was a gnawing fear: what if he ultimately chose wrong? What if this exploration only led him deeper into the labyrinth of self-doubt? Malcolm closed his eyes again, the echo of applause still reverberating as if it were a heartbeat urging him to dare. The promise that he felt in Julia's gaze lingered, a challenge and a blessing entwined. Suddenly, the door creaked open. His mother stood there, silhouetted against the hallway light. Her presence offered a grounding comfort, her smile a gentle reminder of faith and perseverance. "I heard your performance. It was beautiful, Malcolm." "Thank you, Mom," he replied, the vulnerability of aiming higher stripping him bare. But he needed to do more than just bask in her praise, he needed to forge ahead with intention. "I want to explore more, push my boundaries." Her expression softened, the way it always did when she saw the spark of determination in him. "Trust yourself. Remember, it's all about the journey now." With her words, Malcolm felt the pieces coming together. He realized this moment wasn't just a moment for himself, it extended into the world. Somehow, he would stake his claim. The world would see him not just a blind boy, but a thriving artist. As the room dimmed, he played a defiant melody, each note a promise to himself. He could feel a deep connection forming between the past and the future, a bridge connecting the boy in the shadows with the emerging man on the cusp of discovery. As he struck the final chord, he made a silent vow: he would solidify his identity through every strike of those keys. Malcolm stopped, his heart hammering with a fresh determination. What were the depths to which he could delve? He was just beginning to chart the territory of his own evolution, yet a new question cut through the clarity: who would he confront to claim his ground? The whispers of doubt still loomed like smog, but he was ready to wrestle with them head-on. The path of self-discovery awaited him, but one thing was clear: it would require not just strength, but a true confrontation with the depths of expectation and the shadows of his past. The challenge ahead loomed larger, but so too did the excitement of what was to come. With the dawn came a new urgency, and Malcolm felt it seeping into his bones. The sunlight filtered through his window, illuminating his cluttered room, now brimming with possibilities rather than remnants. The echo of the previous evening's applause worked as a catalyst, spurring him to action. He needed to transform the fleeting validation he had experienced into something more substantial, something tangible that could breathe life into his aspirations. He spent the morning at the piano, fingers tracing the keys with an intensity that reflected his inner turmoil. Each note lingered in the air, weaving a tapestry of emotions: longing, ambition, fear. But fear was slowly morphing into resolve. The melodies he explored were no longer driven by the desire to merely impress, they pulsated with a fierce longing to express the entirety of who he was. Yet confusion lingered. Was he to evolve as a classical artist, maintaining the traditions that defined him, or rebel against them by embracing the improvisational freedom of jazz, or dance along the edges blending both? In the depths of his thoughts, a shadow crept back. Doubt whispered insidiously, reminding him of the genre barriers that had often confined him. The established norms of the music community would scrutinize any misstep. What if he failed to choose a definitive path? What if he disappointed those whose expectations weighed heavily on his shoulders? A wave of nausea gripped him at the thought. He planned an upcoming private performance, a test of his evolving identity. But the prospect made the knot in his stomach tighten further. Unlike before, this performance hinged not just on technique but on the emotional authenticity he aimed to convey. What if he bared his soul on stage and was met with silence? Would that echo be an affirmation or more of a condemnation? Determined to engage fully with his potential as an artist, Malcolm decided to seek guidance. That evening, he reached out to an acquaintance and acclaimed pianist, David Marshall, who was known for his genre-blending work. Despite their contrasting backgrounds and experiences, David had shown curiosity towards Malcolm's talent during their previous encounters. When they met, Malcolm was struck by the confidence radiating from David as he played with effortless grace. "You've got raw talent, kid," David said, glancing up with an evaluating eye. "But talent isn't enough. What's your story? What pushes you?" Malcolm hesitated, the weight of the question sinking in. What was his story? He could articulate his struggles, the challenges of navigating a world where he often felt overlooked, but could he shape that narrative into something the audience could resonate with? "I'm still defining it," he finally admitted. The honesty surprised him, and as he spoke, a new sense of clarity dawned. "I want to explore beyond what's expected of me." "Good decision," David replied, his tone grave yet encouraging. "But remember, exploration comes with risks. You might stumble, but each misstep will carve your identity even more deeply." Malcolm felt the fires reigniting within him, propelling him to confront those formidable expectations. Could he shift perceptions? Could he merge the realms of classical and jazz, intertwining their elements to create something profoundly his own? Each heartbeat echoed with fervor. As their session drew to a close, David leaned back, observing him thoughtfully. "Are you ready for the backlash? Your biggest critics might be those closest to you." The thought pierced through Malcolm's own defenses. Would his mother and Julia view his choices as a deviation, a departure from the clear-cut path that had always been outlined for him? The fraying comfort of familiarity twisted into apprehension. Yet the knowledge lingered, the only way forward meant embracing confrontation, grappling with both approval and disapproval. Malcolm returned home, each step built with renewed conviction. He settled at the piano, resolving to put into practice the insights he had gained. The keys responded to his fervor as he hammered out a fusion of styles that pulsed with energy. Each captivating sound whispered of journeys uncharted. But amid the delight of creation, a new question surged forth: what would it mean to stand his ground when the applause turned to criticism? The edges of his ambition bore sharp thorns of anxiety, and the question loomed in his mind, demanding attention. His journey was beginning, but the resolve to confront. What challenge would he face next that would test his resolve to balance passion and expectation? As the days unfolded, Malcolm's resolve solidified into purpose. Each morning, he awoke with fresh determination, the sun illuminating not just his room, but the expanding horizons of his artistry. The initial flutter of doubt had begun to transform into a steady rhythm of ambition, guiding him like the beat of a metronome. He spent hours at the piano, engaged in a symbiotic relationship with the instrument. Each key pressed sent vibrations through him, empowering him to translate the raptures and struggles of his soul into sound. However, the freedom he craved came with unsettling questions that curled like smoke around his thoughts. How could he merge the elegance of classical piano with the soulful spontaneity of jazz? Each time he sat down to compose, he faced a binary choice: to adhere to the familiar or plunge into the unknown. One afternoon, stifled by the weight of his uncertainty, Malcolm reached for his phone. He scrolled through contacts, fingers hovering over a few names. A familiar voice echoed in his mind the wise, candid remarks of David. Trusting the instinct ignited by their last encounter, he summoned the courage to call him. It wasn't just a casual chat he sought, he needed a collaboration that could help him materialize his vision. "David, it's Malcolm," he said, welcoming the sudden uncertainty in his throat. "I'd like to work together. I need help fusing these genres, to really find what represents me." "Of course," David responded, enthusiasm threading through his voice. "Let us meet this Friday. I believe we can create something remarkable." As the week progressed, anticipation bubbled within Malcolm, giving way to moments of unease. What if the collaboration unveiled a depth of incapacity that he dared not confront? Each time he envisioned the upcoming session, he felt a thrill intertwined with a wave of nausea. On the day of the meeting, Malcolm arrived at the studio early, scanning the room as he took a deep breath, his mind racing. The polished decor juxtaposed with his chaotic aspirations a tangible reminder of the chasm he wanted to bridge. David arrived, a bright spark of energy, and began with a few freeform melodic lines that sent shivers down Malcolm's spine. "Don't think too much. Let us explore," David encouraging Malcolm to immerse himself in the fusion of sounds. They began playing, unraveling a spontaneous harmony fusing staccato bursts of classical finesse with the rhythmic pulse of jazz. The room transformed into a soundscape that mirrored their growing synergy. Yet, as they crafted their emerging style, Malcolm's internal conflict loomed large. The shadows of his fears cast darker each time his contributions fell short of the creative juices flowing around him. Would he ever possess the same boldness as David? Would he capture the essence of both genres without losing himself in competition? "Stop. You're overthinking," David interrupted, a firm hand raised as he pointed to him with a knowing smile. "You have talent, Malcolm. It's all about how you tell your story through these melodies. Don't hide it behind technique." The words penetrated deeper than he expected. David's faith stirred something hidden within. As the sun dipped outside, they unraveled the last pieces of what they were building, the atmosphere thick with excitement and apprehension. Malcolm's heart raced. It was unanimous, they needed to share what they had created. The temptation to present their work at his performance loomed tantalizingly. But with the sweetness of possibility came a harsh reality, failure, criticism, and confronting the very expectations he sought to redefine. He felt the weight of judgment. What if they disliked it? What if he stood stark naked in front of them, exposed? Would they see a faux pas where he saw art? Malcolm tasted the bittersweet flavor of risk. The liminal space between fear and exhilaration danced beneath the surface. That night, he stared at the keys, questioning whether they could hold not just his notes but his truth. This journey was pushing his boundaries wider, inviting him to explore the delicate threads that held his identity together. The moment was approaching a collision of artistry and the unseen weight of familial approval. What revelation awaited him as he stood poised on the threshold of possibility? Would this emerging fusion be the key to his transformation, a reflection of his identity waiting to burst forth? Malcolm awoke to the gentle hum of morning, the sun's rays spilling into his room, yet today felt different. The anticipation from his previous encounter with David charged the air, rolling through his veins like an electric current. The lingering doubt began to dissolve, replaced by a burgeoning sense of confidence stitched into every muscle of his being. The piano, more than just an instrument, became an extension of his thoughts. Each key glinted with potential, a silent partner in an evolving story he shared solely with herself. This performance would not only be an exploration of sound but also a confrontation with his own fears. With a firm decision, he committed to blending classical elegance with jazz's raw spontaneity, desperate to break free from the shackles of expectation. On the morning of the performance, he felt a knot twisting in his stomach. Surrounded by seasoned musicians and polished audiences, would he truly fit in, or would he betray himself with mediocrity? He closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. The sensations around him sharpened. He could almost hear the murmurs of the crowd, feel the brilliance of the stage lights dancing against his skin. As he headed to the venue, the vibrant city buzzed around him, people flowing like a river. Each footstep resonated with the urgency he felt within. He adjusted his jacket, a thin barrier between the external chaos and the silent storm brewing in his core. Each note he had practiced echoed in his mind, not merely a sequence of sounds but a vivid representation of his struggles and triumphs. Arriving backstage, he stood behind the curtain, hearing David and other musicians warming up, the air thick with tense excitement. Anxiety surged through him again, like sharp needles pricking his confidence. What if his part failed to reverberate with the soul of the piece? What if his deepest fears of disappointing those who had invested hope in him came true? Then he felt it, the weight of David's assurance in his mind. "It's your story, Malcolm." Those words floated closer, dispelling shadows lurking at the edges of his confidence. This was a test, a chance to reveal not just his skill, but the essence of who he was. The trials, the nights spent in shadows, the aspirations ignited by a mere whisper of music. With the call to take the stage, Malcolm stepped forward, heart thudding in his chest, and fought against the exhaustion of self-doubt. The spotlight warmed him, a new battlefield. He centered himself, fingers poised over the keys as the crowd faded into a soft hum, a distant world. He began playing. The classical pieces wove seamlessly into jazz improvs, each note unlocking fragments of his life story rich with emotion. Malcolm lost himself in the performance, the music spilling forth like a river free of its dam. As he transitioned through complex harmonies, he felt a shift, a direct connection with the audience, transforming from mere spectators to fellow travelers on a shared journey. His fears melted away, transmuted into vitality and authenticity. The performance became a raw tapestry of sound that depicted his struggles and victories, a living embodiment of his art. In those moments, Malcolm realized that what mattered was not just the applause but the resonance that flowed through him, merging with the atmosphere and enveloping everyone around him. As they drew closer to the finale, a spark ignited within him, pushing him to unleash the most daring notes yet, a final embrace of both genres fused into a stunning crescendo. He could practically feel the vibration of his heartbeat in harmony with the pounding rhythm. As the last note hung in the air, Malcolm looked out into the dimly lit audience, scanning faces etched with surprise and intrigue. Breathless, he absorbed the thundering applause, feeling the waves of acceptance surging toward him. But just as triumph began to wash over him, an unsettling realization took hold: the journey of self-discovery was far from complete. What did their applause mean to his deeper identity? In the aftermath of the performance, Malcolm stepped off stage, exhilaration mingling with fresh uncertainty. The applause faded, but questions lingered: who truly understood his music? Who could see beneath the surface of his artistry? The time had come to confront his deepest fears, to demand clarity from those whose opinions he had held so dear. Would the recognition he yearned for reinforce his sense of self or trap him into a mold he feared to occupy? He took a deep breath and walked toward the back room, aware that it was time to face the expectations his own and his family's. What revelations awaited him as he sought their validation, and would it come at a cost? Malcolm's pulse quickened as he approached the back room, a blend of excitement and hesitation swirling within him. He was acutely aware of the energy that followed him, not just the residual buzz of the performance, but the intensity of expectations, both his and those of his family, which loomed larger than the applause that had just echoed through the venue. Facing the door felt like standing on the precipice of a great chasm. One wrong move, one misstep, and he could easily tumble into doubt. He paused and looked around, catching moments of laughter and congratulation from fellow musicians, a world that felt both enticingly familiar and profoundly alien. He couldn't help but reflect on the effort they exerted each day, the years of practice behind their effortless artistry, while he had been battling not just the notes, but the shadows within. As he entered the room, the atmosphere shifted. The air was thick with a mix of pride and scrutiny. His family gathered like a small constellation, their eyes rooting for him yet questioning silently. His mother's eyes sparkled with tears, a reflection of their shared struggles. His father, a stoic figure, stood with arms crossed, a phantom of both judgment and encouragement. "Malcolm," his mother breathed, stepping forward, her voice quavering with genuine emotion. "I was so proud to see you up there. You were incredible." The warmth of her words washed over him, but an internal voice whispered a reminder: soon, the praise would turn into probing questions. "And what's next?" would be their inquiry, veiled as interest but heavy with the weight of expectation. "Thanks, Mom," he replied, forcing a smile, yet inwardly wrestling with the inexplicable turmoil flaming within. He could sense his father's gaze. "You played better than I expected," his father finally said, words laden with an unspoken challenge, a test of both his talent and his commitment. Malcolm shifted, contemplating his father's expectations. Would the applause tonight validate the years of sacrifice, or perhaps serve as a prelude to further demands? Expectations that loomed like mountains, each snow-capped peak more intimidating than the last. "Did it feel like your own music?" A voice chimed in. It was David, emerging from the shadows like a guide through Malcolm's haze of uncertainty. His eyes were sharp, calculating, yet encouraging. "Yes, I think so," Malcolm stumbled, anxiety crawling back up his spine. "But I don't know if don't think." David interrupted, his tone suddenly electrifying the space. "Do you feel the music within you? It's okay to not have all the answers yet. Embrace those questions. Let them fuel your growth." Malcolm took a breath, a spark of realization igniting. Here was an opportunity to explore what he had felt moments before on stage, an interplay of vulnerability and raw sincerity. Each question was an invitation to dive deeper into his identity as an artist, a chance to understand his craft not just as a performer, but as a storyteller. Understanding is part of the journey. "You're not just a musician, you're a catalyst for emotion," David continued fervently. "And that's heavy, Malcolm. You have to decide what your art means to you." A sudden wave of clarity hit him. It wasn't just the performance. It was the ongoing process, the willingness to confront not just the audience's expectations but his own understanding of self. "I don't want to just play," he heard himself assert, almost as if the words had materialized unbidden. "I want my music to tell my story, to reveal my truths." David nodded, impressed yet expectant. "Then let's dig deeper. Let's break the expectations together." As excitement pulsed and anticipation swirled, Malcolm felt a shift. This burgeoning desire to confront his own narratives ignited a flame within him, urging him forward. He had to unravel the hidden layers of his artistry before he could fully claim it. But lurking in the depths of his thoughts was an unquenchable curiosity that combined with renewed determination. What sacrifices would he need to make to fully unearth his potential? And in pursuing that path, what truths might he unearth that could not only challenge familial expectations but redefine the very essence of who he was meant to be? Standing at the threshold of discovery, Malcolm knew he must face not only the audience's applause but the fear of his own becoming. As he prepared to embrace this journey, the lingering question echoing in his mind simmered with urgency: was he ready to confront the true depths of his identity and his artistry? The path to self-discovery awaited him. It was time to ignite that flame and move forward. Would he rise to the challenge, or would he find himself entangled in the very expectations he sought to escape? Malcolm stepped away from his family, the weight of their expectations heavy on his shoulders. The performance felt like a flickering candle, illuminating truths he had yet to fully grasp. In the cacophony of cheers and conversations, he searched for clarity amidst the noise. David's words echoed in his mind, stirring an emboldened yearning to dive deeper into the essence of his music. He found a quiet corner of the back room, the hum of excitement muted in this sanctuary. Surrounded by dim lighting and muted conversations, he could breathe easier. What did his art mean to him? He reached for a pen and a crumpled notebook, an old companion in moments like this. As he began to jot down fragmentary thoughts, he felt the spark of creativity pulse through him. Each word he scribbled was an exploration of his identity. What stories do I want to tell? He pondered. What emotions have I left unexpressed? With each entry, Malcolm peeled back layers of himself. He discovered the sorrow of missed opportunities, the joy of fleeting moments, and the chaos of unspoken truths. Through this process, he began to uncover hidden talents, his ability to convey powerful narratives through the stark contrast of sound. His creative outlet became a mirror reflecting both his fears and aspirations. He paused, wrestling with a realization: the music he played was more than mere notes. It held snippets of his life experience, the pain of growing up overshadowed by familial expectations and the persistent timidity in expressing his true self. This awakening was both electrifying and terrifying. Could he truly harness the complexities of his life experiences to create something compelling? Malcolm's heart raced at the thought of confronting the fears that had long plagued him. The time had come to face the depths of my soul, he thought. Recognizing that each note could embody the trials he had faced, he realized he could fortify himself against the weight of expectations by channeling them into his music. Suddenly, a question popped into his mind with force: what if he expressed his music in a way that exposed his vulnerability? The first step was accepting that perfection was a mirage. Messy, raw emotion was the true heartbeat of art. He envisioned an upcoming performance, a chance to unveil this new facet of himself, to challenge and redefine his relationship with his craft. Yet, the pivotal clash lingered persistently just beyond the veil of his thoughts. If he stepped onto the public stage embracing vulnerability, would that satisfy the unrelenting expectations of his family? Or would it reveal the unkempt nature of familial relationships he'd long evaded facing? Just then, David appeared in the periphery of his vision, breaking into his contemplative cocoon. "Malcolm," he said, his voice a mix of urgency and enthusiasm. "You're on the precipice of something transformative. Let's start shaping your story into a composition. You're ready to create something that is unapologetically you." His heart thudded with the challenge. What if he could craft a performance that would not only surprise those who had doubts about him but also ultimately liberate himself? Malcolm's resolve crystallized. A new music that could narrate the complexity of his life awaited him if he leaned into the discomfort of honesty rather than shy away. The thought galvanized him. "I will confront what scares me the most," he mused quietly to himself. "It's time to embrace the true depth of my identity through my art." As he stood, adrenaline coursed through his veins. The realization that he could wield his vulnerabilities as brushstrokes, painting a narrative of resilience, was daunting yet exhilarating. He sensed a shift in himself, a resolve that surged within him, ready to forge ahead despite the uncertainties. Malcolm turned to David, his eyes alive with purpose. "Let's get to work," he declared. The road of discovery was growing clearer, yet fraught with challenges. But amidst the excitement lay the unresolved question that buzzed in the back of his mind: would his newfound resolve hold firm in the face of harsh judgment once the audience heard the raw truths drumming to life in his music? The allure of what lay ahead, the performance that could redefine him, loomed large. And Malcolm knew it was now or never. The promise of his journey beckoned, but did he have the strength to remain authentic when the world was watching? In the days following that electrifying conversation with David, Malcolm found himself in a whirlwind of creativity and self-discovery. His room became a sanctuary transformed into a chaotic studio, paper strewn everywhere, half-formed melodies echoing through his mind, and the relentless tapping of his fingers on the piano a patient partner in his exploration. The world outside seemed to fade as he immersed himself in this tumultuous journey, intent on unearthing the stories buried deep within. The more he wrote, the more he began to grapple with the ghosts of self-doubt that had once loomed large over him. He filled page after page with lyrics that clashed with his longing for perfection. "What if I fail?" he scribbled before crossing it out, replacing it with, "What if I discover something profound?" Each word was a potential revelation, a step into the vast unknown of his own identity. Malcolm had taken on the challenge to not just play music but to build an auditory landscape that reflected his life's kaleidoscope, its shadows, intricacies, and fleeting gleams of light. But as anticipation mounted, so did anxiety. Collected behind his determined exterior was a gnawing fear of rejection. He wondered if he would once again stand alone under the weight of expectations, or if the audience might see a version of himself that even he struggled to fully accept. To channel this conflict, he made a ritual of confronting his doubts. Each night, he would sit in front of the piano and deliberately choose to play his most vulnerable pieces. With every quivering note, he let the uncertainty wash over him, hoping to transform it into the pulse of his music. During these sessions, he talked to himself, grappling with his familial expectations and the impact of his upbringing. He couldn't help but draw a distinction between their hopes and his truth. Would the music resonate with them, or would it expose the fissure between their dreams and his reality? Amidst this pattern of introspection, David emerged with a proposition that startled Malcolm. "We need to organize a small gathering, your closest friends, a few supporters. It'll be a safe space to test your compositions," he suggested, his enthusiasm barely contained. The mere idea sent Malcolm's heart racing. A gathering meant exposure, potential critique, and his vulnerability laid bare. But the prospect of sharing these raw truths ignited something deep within him. It might be exactly what I need, Malcolm thought. He could envision their responses, the way their encouragement could bolster him, or conversely, how the weight of judgment might threaten his newfound resolve. Determined, he started preparing for what he began to call his revealing. It was no longer about pleasing his family or the audience, it was a declaration of who he was, raw and unfinished. On days he felt overwhelmed, he would scribble powerful affirmations on the walls of his room, reminding himself, "You are enough. You are a storyteller." The night of the gathering approached, and nerves fluttered in his stomach like trapped butterflies. As he rehearsed, the sound of the cackling laughter and the murmured words of expectation blended into a dizzying mix of encouragement and fear. Would they hear him? Would they embrace this unpolished version of himself he was desperate to show? David's reassuring presence by his side helped steady him. "You are not here to impress anyone, Malcolm. You're here to reveal. Trust in your music. Let it breathe," he whispered. When the moment finally arrived, Malcolm stood behind the curtain, heartbeat syncopated with the clinking of glasses and the low hum of chatter growing louder as he prepared to walk onto the makeshift stage. The weight of his decisions pressed against him. Could he truly render the complexities of his journey into melodies for all to hear? With a deep breath, he placed his hands on the keys, the familiar texture igniting a warmth in his soul. As the audience turned their gazes toward him, he hesitated, staring into the sea of expectant faces. That split second, uncertainty gripped him, but with the flick of his fingers, he knew he was not merely a performer. He was a conduit for stories untold. And with that realization, he was ready to bridge the gap between vulnerability and artistry. The first note rang out, and with it came a swell of both resolve and fear. This was his moment, his unveiling. Yet, just as the music began to take flight, a shadow flickered across his mind. What if they didn't understand? What if, in their eyes, the truth was more painful than he could bear? The moment of truth was upon him, and the lingering doubts loomed as large as his aspirations. Malcolm's fingers glided over the piano keys, initiating the first notes of his composition. The sound echoed in the small room, cutting through the ambient noise of murmur and expectation. In those moments, he surrendered to the music the very essence of his journey, each chord infused with struggles, triumphs, and unfiltered vulnerability. Every note he played carried a piece of himself, channeled from the shadows of doubt to the luminosity of newfound strength. This was not merely a performance, it was a revelation. With each phrase, he peeled back layers of apprehension, revealing the raw narrative of his existence that had long been silenced. He could feel the transformation within himself and sense the gradual shift in the room around him. Curiosity and tension slowly morphed into a palpable connection. The melodies unfolded like the pages of a cherished diary, resonating with moments of sorrow and joy. The gentle swing of a jazz riff danced interplay with the structured elegance of classical lines, embodying the fusion of identities he had finally embraced. The music transcended mere performance. It was, instead, an invitation to join him on a journey, to understand the fragments of a life lived in the shadow of expectations. As he transitioned to a more complex section, every key pressed became a brushstroke of courage. It sparked a ripple throughout the audience, where silent faces turned into expressions of reflection. Malcolm could see eyes widen and lips twitch in response to the rising intensity. He was no longer that scared boy, clinging to the hope of acceptance. He had emerged as an artist, claiming ownership of his narrative. He navigated through the crescendo, allowing fear and exhilaration to intertwine in a gripping dance. The final passage neared, amplifying his heartbeat in tandem with the music's rhythm. He roared through dissonant chords that echoed his struggles, the feeling of being overlooked and minimized before gracefully shifting into harmonious resolutions that symbolically represented growth and clarity. As he pressed the final note, it hung brilliantly in the air, a declaration, an affirmation that he had transcended. The silence that followed was suffused with respect. Gradually, applause erupted, not just as a performance's end but as recognition of triumph and transformation. Malcolm blinked through the haze of emotion, staring into the sea of faces illuminated by the warm glow of admiration. In that moment, he stood tall, enveloped by a profound sense of belonging he had yearned for all his life. He felt the warmth of his mother's proud gaze amidst the crowd, the folds of her smile reflecting every ounce of hope she had poured into him. The stark lines of doubt that had previously held him captive now faded, replaced by an undeniable clarity. This was the artistry he had sought, a journey of self-acceptance, ownership of his story, and a determination to forge his own path. As the crowd began to voice their appreciation, Malcolm realized that he had accomplished not just a performance, but a milestone in his life. It marked the intersection of vulnerability and strength, and, above all, the promise he had made to himself to embrace his identity fully. Gathering the scattered threads of his emotions, he stepped away from the piano with a confidence he had never known. Outside, a new horizon awaited him, one devoid of the weights that had once threatened to crush him. He had proven not just to others but to himself that he was an artist with a voice worth hearing. Later that night, surrounded by supportive friends and family, Malcolm felt the swell of warmth as conversations buzzed about the performance. David approached him, eyes gleaming with pride. "You owned the stage. You transformed vulnerability into strength, and that, my friend, is rare." Malcolm nodded, heart swelling with gratitude. "I wouldn't have done it without your help," he admitted. The bond they had built was rooted in trust and acceptance, and it had fortified him through the uncertainties. But it was his own journey that brought him here, a path defined by resilience and a refusal to be boxed in by society's expectations. Now he understood that true artistry lay not in perfection or adherence to genres but in the authenticity of expression, a testament to the life he had lived and an invitation for others to see him as he truly was. The applause echoed in his mind as Malcolm made a silent vow: this was only the beginning. He would continue to pour his heart into every note, challenge himself to break down barriers, and express the tumultuous beauty of his being. In every gathering, performance, and interaction, he would embrace not only who he was but who he could become. With this clarity wrapped around him like a shield, Malcolm felt prepared to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. The fears that once chained him began to dissolve, replaced by the unshakable foundation of self-awareness and growth. His journey of transformation was just starting. The adventure he had always longed for was finally his to embrace. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.